America's evil genius, Travis Cook, back with you for the second half of the Power Hour right here on TFRLive.com, Truth Frequency Radio, and the iHeartRadio app as we wrap up Super Bowl Sunday and wrap up an eventful week in American politics. No doubt about that. And of course, no matter what we do on this program, we always want to take a moment at this point in the show, as we do every week, to give you a gentle reminder, or maybe a not so gentle reminder, that if you are aware of the presence of illegal aliens in your community, in your church, in your school, in your workplace, in the stores or shops that you patronize, in your neighborhood, if you are aware of the presence of illegal aliens or even have strong suspicion that they exist within your purview, by all means, I would encourage you in the most strong terms that I can to share that information with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. You can always contact ICE at 866-347-2423. Once again, the telephone number for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is 866-347-2423. By all means, take that number down, have it handy, and when you run across illegal aliens, please, by all means, share that information with ICE so that they can investigate and take care of the situation appropriately. Again, the contact number for Immigration and Customs Enforcement is 866-347-2423. Take that number down, keep it handy. The life you save may very well end up being that of somebody you love. Right before we went to break, I had to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer, didn't I? Even though there is reason for celebration this weekend, even though this coup having been thwarted is a positive thing, is a reason for celebration, a reason to say, look, our system, as clunky as it can be, has worked. And while it is in many ways profound to have that realization that an attempt in anything but good faith to overturn a rightful election, to overturn the will of the people, and to surreptitiously grab power from the people in this country, that having been thwarted is truly a reason to thank God and to reflect on our blessings. Because frankly, that isn't always prevented everywhere else in the world. While all of those are positives, I mentioned to you right before the break that there is still a reason for consternation. There is still a reason for, yes, anger over all of this. There is a common phrase out there. It's not really political in nature. It applies to a lot of areas in life. You undoubtedly have heard it. The phrase goes something like this: if you come for the king, you best not miss. Now, whether that phrase is being used in literary terms, in political terms, in world history terms, wherever it comes up, the implication of that phrase is that if you are going to make an egregious attempt to usurp power, then you had better be successful, because if you're not, if the king survives, in the literary sense, then you would have every expectation that he seek vengeance on you, that he punish you for your attempt. It's not something that is peculiar to any one particular type of government or any particular nation or any particular culture. It's something that is obvious and understood by every human being who has ever taken a breath. We all instinctively understand this. and particularly in a case like this, in which every nefarious means that could be conceived has been used by the Democratic Party and the journalists and the establishment Republicans, some of them, and the academic world and big tech. Every nefarious means that one could think of has been used to first try to prevent the American people from voting for President Trump, and then when they did, to attempt to wrongly overturn the election. Now that all of this has happened, now that you see such an egregious attempt, it is common sense to understand that there should be, and on some level there must be, punishment, consequences, repercussions. You came for the king and you missed. More importantly, you came for the American people and you missed. And yet, instead of seeing the repercussions, the punishment, the implications against those who engineered this failed coup, and I am speaking specifically of the Democratic Party, instead of seeing that, what are we seeing? We are seeing, or we will see, less than 24 hours from now, those who attempted this coup go into Iowa and be allowed to have a caucus at which they will be allowed to begin the process of nominating their own presidential candidate for 2020. Yes, the coup was averted. We have massive amounts to be thankful for in that respect. But the traitors, the anti-Americans, those who tried to take our power, they're still around. They're still operating. They're still being allowed to operate in America. Now, I don't know if this will make some of you uncomfortable for me to say this or not, but that is absolutely, unequivocally unconscionable, unthinkable. It is wrong on every level one can conceive of. How on earth can you try to engineer a coup, to steal an election, to overturn an election rightfully executed by the American people? How can you go through that, be caught, be brought to the light of day as you were during this whole impeachment process, and then, after it's all said and done, after we know what you did, after it's clear, how in the hell can you be allowed to continue to take part in the American political process? Somebody please answer that question for me. It's not right. It makes no sense. If justice were truly served, the people who tried to engineer this failed plot, the Democratic Party, would be prohibited from taking part in the political process. The party should be dissolved entirely. There is simply no justification whatsoever for the Democratic Party to be allowed to continue to exist given what we've seen over the last 2 years. No reason whatsoever. I don't know how, with a straight face, you can argue to the American people that even after a failed coup attempt, that somehow you deserve the right to participate in the political process, that somehow you should still have ballot access, that somehow your very civil rights should not be ripped away from you. How do you make that argument? What argument do you make? Because I certainly can't think of a tenable one. The very fact that less than 24 hours from now, these traitors to our nation will gather to select their own traitorous presidential candidate, and I don't care which one of them it is, it ultimately ends up being they will be a traitor. No doubt, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we're all supposed to stand by and just allow this to happen as though this is the normal course of action, as though this is the normal course of politics, as though they have some reason, some reasonable expectation of access to our political process after they just tried to destroy it? Are you nuts? Now, don't get me wrong. I understand that what I'm suggesting right now is probably something that makes a good number of you uncomfortable. And you longtime listeners will know, you will understand, you will be familiar with the fact that this is not the first time that I have gone down such a road philosophically. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm the only one in media who will make these sort of statements. And I understand that even to some people who are ostensibly on my side politically or who share a lot of political beliefs with me, when I suggest that the Democratic Party be completely outlawed, completely dissolved, and those who continue to espouse those policies and those ideologies be severely punished, when I suggest that, I know that's a bridge too far for a lot of people who are even on my side politically. I'm aware of that. And I know over the last 2 or 3 years on this program, I have brought up the question at times, uncomfortable as it's been for some to pontificate upon. I have brought up the question of what do you do when an opposition political party crosses the line from being simply a disagreeable adversary in the political sense and becomes instead a significant national security threat. That's not a conversation a lot of people desire to have. Even if it's true, we don't want to acknowledge it, many of us, because it forces us to make some very hard decisions and encounter some very hard truths. But there have been points over the last 3 years, and you longtime listeners are aware of it, in which I've looked around myself at the world and the political environment we're in, and I have not had a choice other than to ask that uncomfortable question. In fact, about 3 years ago, I started a website based around that idea. It is a website called outlawthedemocrats.com, where I have written at length on the idea of what do you do with a political party that has become a national security threat. I have a number of articles there that have taken place over the last 3 years. If you've not gone to that website and perused it, I invite you to do so. Before the articles of impeachment went to the Senate, I even penned a piece over there right after the first of the year where I took a temperature check of myself and I reassessed the question, the idea of, hey, did I go too far when I started the website? Did I overreact in the question of what do you do when the Democrats become a national security threat? And you can go read that piece. It's the most recent piece there. But ultimately, I came to the decision that no, I did not overreact, given what I've seen over the last couple of years. And certainly this impeachment attempt solidifies, at least to me, the fact that I'm asking the question. I understand it's a very uncomfortable idea for a lot of you. That the actions of a political party and a group of voters have been so egregious that they must be disassociated from political life in America. I know that's a hard thing and a difficult thing for some of you to grasp. And even among those of you who are hearing me right now and you think I'm going too far, you think I've gone nuts, you think I've gone crazy, and you're thinking to yourself, well, even if you wanted to do such a thing, you nut job, there's no way in our country, in our political system, that you could do it. We have constitutional rights. There are constitutional guarantees. You couldn't do that even if you wanted to. But is that true? Because I can instantaneously think of a period in American history where we as a nation did something very similar to what I'm suggesting we do to the Democrats, where our nation did something very similar to a group of people whose beliefs and political ideology and whose actions were extremely disagreeable to a lot of America. I can instantly think of a scenario and a situation in which we did it. In which we did things to a group of people that were far more draconian than I'm suggesting we do to the Democratic Party. You see, we've been here before. We've gone over the top before in trying to disconnect certain groups of people from the political process. This is not unheard of in America. So if you think it's impossible to disassociate the Democratic Party from American politics, to outlaw it forever, to disconnect those who have those influences from our political process and from civil life, if you think that's impossible, I would offer to you the example of Reconstruction. I would offer to you the example of what happened to many of the Confederates after the Civil War. Now think back to your schooling. Think back to the stories of Reconstruction that you were told. And as I think back on Reconstruction, it's odd to me that now that I'm older and have some perspective, and I look back at how I was taught Reconstruction, both in primary, high school, and then certainly in college, more so in college, but it happened in both. I'm amazed at how I was taught Reconstruction and how matter-of-factly it was taught, as though the things that were happening were completely normal and completely that they weren't out of the ordinary, that this was the obvious thing to happen. That's how I was taught it. I look back now as I'm older, I'm like, wow, that's kind of twisted. That's kind of messed up. But during the time of Reconstruction, what happened to the Confederates? Well, it's a long story, but there were successful attempts in various states to prevent Confederate officers and Confederate leaders from having the right to vote after the Civil War, preventing them from running for political office. Many Confederates, depending on the state and the military jurisdictions of the time, were forced to lose property, lose wealth. Martial law effectively was implemented in some of these places. Folks, we've been here before. And regardless of whatever you might think of the Civil War, whether you think the actions of the Confederates were justified or not, that's a totally different debate for another time. But the one thing you can say about the Confederates, as disagreeable as you might think some of their actions were, the one thing you've got to admit is that for everything they did not try to engage in a coup against the federal government. They didn't. The Confederates had no desire at all to overthrow the federal government. All they wanted was independence. All they wanted was to seek their own independence. No different than what the revolutionaries did at the time of America's founding. Now again, whether you think they were justified in that pursuit or not is a different question. But they had no desire to pull a coup on the American government and replace it. In fact, the Confederacy even sent ambassadors to Washington to have normalized relations. It didn't end up working out, but they made every effort. In fact, the term Civil War is wrong-headed because Civil War means that you're trying to upend the government. They didn't want to do that. So whatever you might say about the Confederates, at least they didn't try to engage in a coup against a duly elected government. But these Democrats sure as hell did. And just to make it clear, yes, I'm saying what the Democrats just did here in this impeachment attempt was worse than what the Confederates did. No doubt about it. And yet look what we did to the Confederates. Look how we took away their civil rights and their property and their wealth. Well, why in the hell can't we do the same dadgum thing to the Democrats who made an attempt at something far, far, far more egregious? Now, I know there's going to be some comfort taken when whoever this presidential candidate is comes up in 2020 and gets his ass kicked. That's fine. But that's not enough. Vengeance at the polls is not enough. The Democrats need to be run out of American politics entirely, permanently, and forever! God bless you. This is Travis Cook, America's Evil Genius. We'll talk to you next time.